Welcome to the Creative Brew, helping you keep your creative juices brewing. We're giving out chunks of insight, motivation, and practicality for your creative journey. Narco is just not a company, it's a way of life. Born from the vision of embracing the gnarly spirit, we at Narco are dedicated to crafting American made products that embody the essence of adventure and freedom. Our mission is clear: to empower individuals to live life to the fullest, unapologetically, being themselves and finding tranquility in the pursuit of remarkable experiences. You can visit Narco at narcousa.com. My next partner is Elevate Coffee Trading, and if you appreciate specialty coffee, enjoy outdoor adventure, and love helping elevate the lives of children around the world, then you're going to love Elevate Coffee Trading. Their mission is to extract hope through love, coffee, and adventures. There's free shipping in the United States, and every bag of coffee helps sponsor health and education for children in coffee producing countries and in areas of need in the United States. You can use promo code Elevate21 on your next order, and you can follow their journey on social media at Elevate Coffee Trading. Or you can visit online at elevatecoffeetrading.com, and let's start extracting hope together. And this episode is brought to you by Baba Coffee, smuggling good vibes. Baba roasts their coffee beans each week and only offers the freshest coffee. They have espressos, lattes, cappuccinos, pour over, or drip coffee. You can try their cold brew coffee, nitro cold brew, or bulletproof coffee, and boba milk teas. They also have a wide assortment of delicious food. I would suggest you try the avocado toast, mimosas, wine, or beer. On the weekends, you can check out some great music like the Soto Six and food like Eliza the Shelf and others over the weekend, every Friday and Saturday, beginning at 6 p.m. You can check out everything they got going on Facebook and Instagram at Baba Coffee. And we're back with a new episode of Creative Brew, giving you insights on your creative journey. Today, we have talented creator, artist, teacher, Margaret Chiaro. If you're not, if you haven't seen her work before, check it out. She's got all kinds of stuff. I know you got your website up, and so if you're actually local to the area, she's got to work at a lot of different gallery spaces. Even with Studio Ace Arts, as well as some other galleries are all around the area. But and like I said, she may tell you a little bit about her process. It's incredible. If you ever see some of her time lapse videos, they don't even serve it justice, because I sort of know her technique and I know how much time it took to actually develop that. But I'll let her sort of share share her story, and we'll start the episode. So Margaret, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me just short origin story, just a little bit about you, and yeah, which I know about you, but maybe more for the audience.
Yeah, I grew up in York, Pennsylvania, and my family was really supportive of me exploring the arts from a really young age. I dabbled in really any medium I could get my hands on, but did not think I would take it on as a career until time to decide in college.
Okay.
And then I decided to go for it. I had a lot of other things I like to do, but this was always my first passion.
Nice.
And it is a scary endeavor to take on. You don't really know what you're going to get into to actually make a living when you go into getting your art degree. I know the dream is to just be a maker in general,
Yes.
but that's fleeting for most of us. We always have to have a side job.
So, and I think you could probably elaborate. I know definitely being on the art and business side, and sort of understanding all the things necessary, but maybe from more of a because I'm on the more of the design and commercial art, but even being a fine artist, what is for you? What are things that maybe other aspiring artists, maybe what do they need to sort of consider, even if they're trying to promote or sell their art? I mean, is there certain things that
There are, but there's so many different ways of going about it. Are you someone that can pump out work really quickly and think about price point differently? There's such a variety of venues, whether you're really seeking to go to a museum or a gallery or a co-op. I do highly recommend just kind of getting your feet in the water by submitting to a lot of group shows. Most of us get a lot of no's in the beginning.
Yeah.
But then you start to find your niche audience, and then you kind of know where to reach out more.
Okay. Nice. Nice. Yeah. So I think that's always one of the big things. I mean, I know with people that they're always promoting their own work online and just through different channels, and I think everybody's trying to figure out like how to work, really how to make it work. I mean, we're always sort of used to just making great, and that's almost like the
Right.
easy part. It's like getting people to, and I think that might be the resounding thing is how do we get people outside the art spectrum to value that artwork. So and I also noticed, and I know you had some really great exhibits before, even on like Canvas and some other places. So, like for you, what are things? Are there certain things? Are you trying to consider even when you do these exhibitions? Are you catering towards someone that may not know about your art, or someone that's like a fan of your art? I didn't know how you really.
Don't really think about it at all in the
Okay.
creative process. And I wouldn't say I'm an intellectual, interested person, but in the creative process, it's more like a flash comes into my mind. I try to come up with a model or someone that I can sort of originate this idea, and then it morphs a lot in the process. So even if I'm able to generate a reference, it never ends up looking like the reference. Even when I pose my model, I have my lighting, everything. There's
Yeah.
a lot of energy just comes out with the paint itself.
Okay. And well, speaking of that, like how I know you don't have to elaborate too much on on your style, but like what is your process? When you're creating all these art pieces.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of different ways I could approach that because the process itself, in now thinking purely about a body of work. So where I used to just think about that individual painting, I'm now thinking big picture. So I'll usually do a sketch of an overarching concept that might encompass 30, 50 paintings. And if I, in my ideal world, had a
Okay.
space to show all of them, what would that look like?
Wow. Okay.
And then it starts to fall into, okay, what are the individual pieces? Where are the different sizes? What are the shapes I want to see? What's the color palette?
Yeah.
I work in the vein of magical realism.
Okay.
And that mostly started because in grad school, they said I don't fit any of the current trends, which I thought was kind of a compliment because I
Yeah.
thought, I'm an innovator. But they were basically saying, well, nobody's going to want your stuff right now because you're not fitting in. But, I think when we go into the creative process, we have to be honest to ourselves and intuitive and let those things come out.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with that. Magical realism is it's kind of taken off more recently as a visual motif, but it was originally mostly literary. But I was very aligned with that. And there's a need for me to ground things in reality,
Yeah.
but take them into a made up world that I create.
Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, I'd say I know person for me. I sort of, and if you hadn't got a chance to sort of check out any of her work, I'll probably put some maybe some pieces in whenever we re-release this episode. But just to give you an example, I'll definitely put her Instagram handle in the show notes, or even one of the posts, and you can check out some of her work, so you can sort of understand where what she's talking about with magical realism. So as far as inspiration, what are and generally I can sort of look at people's styles and like, okay, I know they took a little bit of different things for you. What's been um some of your biggest influences?
I am a huge art lover, and the things that I gravitate to looking at have absolutely nothing to do with how I create. So, like Francis Bacon, I've always
Yeah.
been very fond of, and seeing his retrospective, extremely powerful work. Obviously, doesn't relate at all technically to my work.
Yeah.
But I would say that's my first focus: is how do I reach people in the most universal sense.
Yeah.
So, human nature, emotion, the psychology of how we intuit things. I really love placing adults with their inner child. Um, there's some overarching concepts of interconnectivity and universal energy that kind of applies to all my work, even when I change through the different bodies.
Yeah. Nice, nice. I know person for me, and like I said, I'm always, and I think I always encourage, and it's something to sort of piggyback because I'm real. I love art history, and I always feel like you always have to go back to the masters and sort of see what they did, and then not to say necessarily you want to copy them, but like what were their use? How did they use light? How did they use color? Mediums they use. And I know for even for a lot of my work personally, I've always been fans. Like I've always loved Da Vinci.
Yeah,
That was like my Michelangelo Da Vinci. Like I love
me too.
their process. I probably love Da Vinci's thinking more than I did his actual
I agree with
artwork.
you.
So
Yeah.
that's something where like when I see him like inventing or creating all these different things, like that was like when I saw that in high school, like that's I wanted to be like Da Vinci. Like that's what I wanted to be. Like I want to just create anything. And so that was my methodology with a lot of things, is understanding like, if I am a creator, I can invent, try to invent anything that I want to.
Absolutely.
And so that's the sort of mindset that I usually come with when I'm, experimenting or doing different things. Like that's Da Vinci. That's what I want to do. So
Absolutely. And I can totally see the correlation. I would say I work the same. I have a hypothesis,
yeah,
right? And then I do the experiments,
yeah,
and then I see if it actually works out.
yeah. Yep. So right now, I know you're telling me you're doing some teaching as well. How do you how do you feel about that? I mean, I know there's a lot of artists that like, nah, I don't want to teach, but have you always had that sort of like teaching nature, like wanting to show others how to create artwork?
Um, I love my mother's a teacher.
Yeah.
So that runs in the family, but it's more I love helping people. So it's like, how do I best apply that? What's my strongest asset to share?
Yeah.
And I have such a passion for technical information. So in my own experimentation, I tried every style I could think of. I tried every medium I could think
Yeah.
of. So now if somebody says I want to make a painting on wood that looks like graffiti but not done with spray paint, I can kind of be their encyclopedia of
Yeah.
how we can make that happen.
Okay.
But teaching is so rewarding. And I think the biggest hurdle I had to figure out in the beginning was, what is my pedagogy
Yeah.
and philosophy behind how I want to introduce the information? Because through school, I had a real mix.
Hmm.
Um, it's a hard gig,
Yeah.
but what I didn't love were the instructors that maybe had, I don't know if it was conscious or unconscious, but a bit of an agenda that we were their disciples. We should paint a la them.
Yeah.
And I don't want anyone to paint like me. I want you to paint like you,
Yeah.
but in the strongest voice I can help you have.
Yeah.
So I usually start out with all my students trying to figure out, like, what is your goal? What's your innate pictorial language? And then how do we just strengthen your voice?
I like that. That's great. I think sometimes, especially at maybe some of the more prestigious art schools or stuff, they want to have their, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a cult or anything, but it's,
There's one way to do
yeah,
it.
yeah,
And that's never true enough.
yeah, and I think that's something for any aspiring creator that like sort of just create what you're passionate about, or what what interests you at the moment. Um,
I
so
do like a little bit of formalism, though. That's the
yeah,
one thing I would say. Like, let's talk about compositional
yeah,
things, and let's talk about
yeah,
color palette. Let's talk about balance,
yeah,
mark making. There are some things that I think no matter how you paint, you
yeah,
should know the background of. And the more tools you take on, the more your original self expression can come across to others.
yeah.
So, yes, there is some that's more curriculum based, but I would say most of my focus is on that individual's goals.
Nice. So what do you feel? I mean, even with the maybe the more mental aspect of someone creating their artwork and actually loving it. Do you feel like that's been a struggle for like even for the ones that you teach, and maybe they're just ultra talented, but they feel like, oh my my artwork is just crap. Um,
I feel that way
yeah,
all the time. Like, I think there's two paintings in the course of hundreds of paintings. I thought, oh, I nailed it.
yeah,
Most of the time, I'm like, okay, I just gotta walk away because I'm gonna paint the same painting the rest of my life if
yeah.
I don't. But yeah, with my students, um, the kids that I teach, so my age range right now is 12 to about 70. So
Okay,
I have a huge range. And I have some neurodiverse students. So I get really interesting feedback from everyone. Some people are quite confident. I would say for the most part, everyone is very self-conscious about, once I get out of the studio and I'm sharing a little piece of my soul,
yeah,
is it any good?
yeah,
I think if you're happy in process, you should not worry so much about product.
Yeah.
No matter what, it's so subjective. You're going to find someone who loves it and someone who hates it. And if even if it's purely decorative, you're not making a statement that could offend or love. There's still going to be someone that doesn't understand.
Yeah.
So I myself really had to teach myself to the process is mine, product is for all, but I'm not gonna put up a shield and I'm not going to I'll take everything with a grain of salt, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. You definitely develop some tough skin. I think that's something that I don't know. And I was like, I've been out of school for so long. I mean, I know in design school, we had our critique sessions, and it was like,
They're
you
hard.
gotta, yeah, you gotta learn how to develop some tough skin real quick. And
People are very on
and
it.
I don't know if they do that anymore. Like, I don't know how hard.
True. I mean, I'm like 12, no, longer. We'll say a while out of grad
Yeah,
school. So
but yeah, I always find that interesting. Like, just you know, being able to take that feed, like how well even your students, how well are they able to take feedback and
yeah.
then sort of refine that in their
I like to take the approach of asking a question instead of a statement.
okay.
Do you think this works? Does this color have balance? Because I'm really trying to get them to be the decider.
Yeah.
And I some of that comes from my own personal aesthetic that I don't want to put on them.
Yeah.
So I think it's always better to let them question themselves in process
Okay.
and really decide. And I usually will preface by saying, when I ask you this, if your immediate response is no, I don't want to do what she's saying, that's a good thing to trust.
Yeah.
Because your gut is always going to tell you something in your creative process.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. That's actually a better way of going about it. I know when we did critique sessions was like, I don't like this.
Yeah.
This is why. Instead of bringing up the question first, or even the teacher going with the question first,
Yeah.
and then making us sort of go back and like, okay, this is why I proposed it this way, or um,
Analyze your own
yeah,
process a
yeah,
little more.
yeah, I like
And
that.
the why of there may be a very strong intentionality to that thing that you did
Yeah,
that maybe it's not coming across to the viewers, but it can still be there in a different way.
yeah,
So I think if you ask the question, it's okay. It's almost like you presented a new language,
mhm,
but it's not being translated. So how do I still have this language, but get it to go to more people?
yeah.
So
That's the way of yeah. And that's something that's actually a really great assessment is understanding how to get people to sort of even people that maybe are art lovers or people that they're not into art at all, but they can still look at that piece like, man, this is where I let the garbage truck pass by. This is a beautiful piece of artwork,
yeah,
and I think just figuring out ways of communicating that ideal and figuring out ways of just connecting those dots. I know, um, I know, I find myself I've always been in art. My mom was an art, I sort of consider her my art teacher, but uh, sort of trained me when I was younger in the art, and I'm really fortunate to sort of still, still be creating even now. But
awesome.
it was one of those to where just understanding how to understanding the basic principles, understanding. I mean, even when I used to do my artwork and I would give it to my mom or my uncle, like they would tell me they love it. But they would give me like little things to sort of think about and assess it. And I think just dealing with them, I think it forced me, even when I got into college, I was able to have a thicker skin and understand like, hey, when someone picks my design or whatever, it's you take the emotion out of it. It makes it easy, but
Yes.
let's say it's still hard.
Right.
But it does force you to sort of look back and figure out ways of getting better. Even now, I'm still like a really bad critic of even a lot of my designs and all. So
Too.
I'll tell myself, I'll look at it and like, oh, this is horrible.
Me
Uh,
too. I
and then,
usually need my husband or my parents to say, no, no, it's good.
yeah,
Sad that I need that pat on the back. But
yeah. I mean, I know I'll look at some of your stuff online and I'm like, okay, I did not use the colors like I could have, because I'll see certain color palettes and I'm like, okay, I did not consider that.
mhm.
Let me go back and
Do you ever get so far into the process that you almost don't see the whole image anymore? I
um,
get lost in the parts and I have to turn it away from me for like a week and not look at it at all to get fresh eyes on it.
yeah. I tend, for me personally, when I started, Even if I'm doing like the coffee cup artwork and stuff,
Yeah.
usually I sort of start with the end in mind. So I already sort of have a good idea of like how I want it. It's just seeing if I'm going to execute it or not.
Yeah.
That's really the big thing. So sometimes it comes out like, okay, well, it's come out better than when I would have thought. And sometimes it's like, okay, I'm going to tear this up and toss this. But I've been making myself, just like I've got the image. My job is sort of figuring out how do I execute it, and if I'm and it may be, I may go through a certain process to execute those ideals, but I just want to, I want to figure out ways of executing it as efficiently and as close as I can to what I, had originally thought. So,
Well, and that brings me to another thought because in thinking of your elevator pitch as an artist,
yeah,
what encompasses me and that universal energy, interconnectivity, those are more the broad concepts.
yeah,
But I would say I very recently realized I have like a whole film playing in my head,
okay,
and I'm trying to pick the one still that will give you the whole story. Because same thing. I have like an end game in my mind, but it's a series of ways it could be done.
mhm,
So my hardest issue is picking which of those things I'm imagining
yeah,
gets my point across most succinctly.
yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's really really good point. So, I mean, right now, I mean, for you, what things are inspiring you right now?
Mm.
Just in your life. Sometimes people are like, "What's inspiring me?" I was like, "Well, it's just anything. It could be anything that's going on in your own personal world right now that you look at it like, man, that uplifts me in some form of fashion."
Um, Kindness is a big one. I'm lucky to have some really good people in my life, but family, my husband, my cats, like those things are all, I guess, put me in the right mindset.
Okay.
But as far as actually inspiring the work, I'm really focused right now on this. The inner child was cloud nine. So I just
Yeah.
finished the series of nine that was all about the inner child and the adults playing in the clouds. And I got a little stuck in a color palette there.
Yeah.
I typically work in, I would say, darker, more muted tones, and this
Yes.
was cotton candy pink and blue, which
Yeah.
was a big change.
Yeah. I like it. I mean, I love the colors of it.
Yeah. But it's now spiraled into three other sub-series that I'm going to be working on.
Cool.
And it's allowing for drastic changes in color palette, size,
Yeah.
multi-figure. Um, but it always comes back to human beings, the human experience. I am a low tech person. That's why, hence the oil painting. But there's something, my love of nature, my love of animals, our connection to the planet in general and each other. Not, I don't want it to sound negative. I feel like we're losing that a little
Yes.
bit.
Yes.
And I just want to have a really positive reminder of those things. I mean, we can talk about the green movement and these ideas for society, but we just need to reconnect with each other, with our surroundings, be a little more in the moment, a little bit off the device.
Yes. Yeah. It gets
Even while we're
yeah.
streaming on YouTube, I know,
Tell you go low tech.
right?
While we're streaming this.
Or at
Uh,
least choose the input you're letting in your brain, right? We can go down a rabbit hole really quick of negativity when we're online.
yeah.
And I had to take a break myself because I realized it was really affecting me. So really picking and choosing those positive influences, you draw that in the more you seek it out. So yeah, I would say make good choices. My mom's gonna love that I said that.
So, okay. So right now, creative tips.
But I knew that if I wanted to kind of make this a career, I had to be hyper focused on one thing.
Yeah.
I actually have tattoos of paintbrushes on me because that was the one thing I knew I'd want forever.
Yeah.
The only thing I'd want forever because it's also like a little, all right, you can't give up on this.
Yeah.
This is what you do. And hyper focusing on oil painting has made me really experimental in that medium,
Mhm.
which when you kind of flop around in different mediums, you don't get to see the versatility of the one.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I would say is find your medium of choice and then practice, practice, practice. Be constant about it. I read a great book and it was, a little bit treat it like a job, put your hours in. So when I have my studio days, I am a minimum of 8 hours.
Okay.
It's regular work day.
Yeah.
Usually it can go up to 10 hours.
Okay.
And it can be exhausting, but I love every second, no matter how tired I am.
Yes. Yeah, I do. I do enforcement even with a lot of the projects, client projects I'm working on, and sometimes even now is I'm sort of in that sort of slow point. Um, for me personally, like this is probably the optimum time for me to like to work on personal projects, sort of just work on different techniques because usually once it hits like July,
Yeah.
it's everything's just ramped up.
Right.
But I do try to find been making myself find more time to make sure I'm still sketching,
Right.
just trying out different. Obviously, I'm on the digital side, but I'm always, even with the coffee cups, it forces me to go offline
Yeah.
and go to something handheld and really force myself to, experiment with different mediums and see how it works. And that's what I love.
Sure, the digital,
Oh,
because if
yeah.
that's your medium, go for it.
Yeah.
But knowing what that passion
Yeah.
is a really good thing. I think a lot of us struggle. We want to be creative, but we don't know what avenue to take.
Yes.
So finding the avenue first and then practicing and reaching out to people. I'm really introverted. This would have scared me to death a long time ago, but there's wonderful people in there. It's just like any other career.
Yeah.
There's really good people and there's really bad people, and you just have to navigate through it.
Yeah.
But for the most part, people in the arts are pretty aligned, pretty loving,
Yeah.
and there are a million ways to get your work out there. I know one person that purely sells on Instagram, and then someone else who's in high-end galleries, someone that doesn't want anything to do with galleries and only wants museums. So you really just go with the flow, kind of say yes to everything in the beginning,
Yeah.
and then find the ones that you like the most. Especially for those of us that don't have a trust fund,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Just keep making, keep getting out there.
Yeah, because yeah, sooner or later you'll have the future. You'll have the Margaret Chiaro, incorporated, and then hey, I'll have to try to buy the licensing rights to use your work on everything. That's what I. So that's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for Margaret Chiaro Incorporated, so I can go to you and like, okay, I want to buy the licensing rights to use your artwork on literally everything.
Oh gosh, I would need a manager before that.
Yeah.
I'm just a hide in the studio painter.
Yeah. But and then before we sign off, what are some last little words of wisdom? Just
Mm.
something that maybe the
I
people
do
that will
not
listen to
think
this.
I am wise in any way,
Oh,
but I know what my experiences are.
okay.
And I had a great speaker at my graduation for grad school. Little shout out to New York Academy of Art. Wonderful experience there. Heavy technical knowledge, but he kind of, coming from someone who doesn't have money to just explore being an artist right away, you have a couple options. One is to work in the arts, surround yourself every day in it, and you're painting when you can. Though being in the arts that much can influence your work. The other is to get a job completely devoid of the arts and keep that sanctuary and separate. Um, I've done both, and I prefer to work in the arts. I realize how much I love teaching. I have some really great students. Another shout out to Studio Eights and Julia Pfister. She's had my back since I moved here. It's been a great working experience with her. Um, yeah, you gotta figure out a way to survive in the world, but make every moment you can your studio time.
That's great. There's some those some good words of wisdom. I know there's been some people I know personally that's kept their cradle side, and then they'll get something that's on the complete opposite end,
Yeah.
and make it work. And then I've got some people that try to merge everything together. I know me personally, like I sort of like I want to try to merge everything
Yeah,
together.
right,
So
right.
that's just how I think personality wise how I am.
Did you start out on the other side of that, like doing something outside of the arts and then
Um,
ended up in that, or just always?
Yeah, I've always sort of just been in it, and I,
Yeah.
I think it's one of those where I've just been, and I probably attribute it to my mom. I've just been one of those really stubborn, persistent with just going. I mean, when I was a kid, like I wanted to be in the arts
Yeah.
somehow. So I didn't know what, but and my
Same.
mom, she didn't have, like I said, she didn't have the knowledge and resource like that I would have now. Like she was like, she knew I was talented, but just trying to get me into the right avenue. So it's just one of those where I think, coming from the South, I just had that sort of work ethic.
Yeah.
And like I'm just one of those where I'm just wildly consistent. And even if I'm not working on something, I'm working on something.
Yeah, I hear you.
And that's just how my brain works. And
I like the stubborn comment because
yeah,
I'm quite stubborn too.
Yeah.
My grandfather called me capatos, hard headed, which can be to your benefit because one thing I do recommend is you shouldn't try to be an artist because you want to. It should be a need. I think just wanting it is not enough because it's a really hard thing to do. But if it's something that you're never going to give up, regardless of the financial side of it, I think it's well worth your time.
Yeah.
But, and side note on that, everyone should have a creative outlet. Like just give it a whirl. Doesn't matter if it's food, painting, music, really anything. And this is where I'd love to see the public school system step up a little more with the art and music programming. I do teach kids that are getting art and music maybe twice a year. It's become really low on the totem pole, and it's really sad to me because that's what saved me in school.
Yep. Yep. Same here. I mean, it's definitely art advocacy. Definitely keeping arts and education. That's a growing, especially around here, which is sort of wild. It's a growing topic. You think
Yeah.
in California it wouldn't be the case, but yeah, definitely. If you're while I mean, if you're voting or anything, I'm not going to say this is like a political episode, but figure out some way of supporting the arts
Yeah.
in the schools.
Or find your local institution like a Studio Ace, a nonprofit, and donate to them because they are providing really affordable, accessible art programs for kids because they're not getting it in school.
Yeah.
So there's always a ways to seek it out. But yeah, with the more people that support, the more people that go look. Never be afraid to go in a museum or a gallery and ask questions. That it's there for everybody. So this idea of the arts being elite in any way is a big misnomer.
Yeah.
You just go in and look
Yep.
and digest everything you can.
Yeah, I love you. I mean, I know that was, I mean, just going through high school and stuff. I mean, just going in there and like being inspired, seeing all the great masters. That was what I grew up on. I think now with technology and I think just our culture now is like a lot of them don't do that anymore. And appreciating like these are works that stood the test of time, and you have to understand why does it still hold up?
Yeah.
And understanding, okay, where can I incorporate that whatever elements into my own artwork. So yeah, always go back and learn history. Got to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, hey, this has been a great episode. First of all, quick shout out to Baba Coffee. These last episodes we've been doing live. So please take in mind, we got background music, we got people here hanging out, working, which is it's cool. Like I said, I love the background atmosphere. But yeah, quick shout out to Baba Coffee. Smuggling good vibes, good coffee. They've got great coffee, wine, kombucha, great food. Um, Also, too, on the weekends they have music every weekend, starting at 6 o'clock, I believe, from like 6 to 8. So that's every weekend. So if you're in the area, come by, check them out over the weekend, and they always have different food vendors as well. Also, too, they have a coffee and wine club too membership. So if you're interested in that, come by, check it out. They've got a little display about that too as well. But just supporting my local coffee shop, supporting local businesses, and what Margaret here is supporting local creators. But that's what I got today. So this has been another episode with me, with Margaret.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, and how can people reach out to you?
Oh, yeah. On Instagram, it's Margaret Chiaro, and that's Chiaro. And the same for my website, margaretchiaro.com.
So this has been Margaret Quantel, and this is the Creative Brew. Be creative, stay inspired.
But no, I won't take it. No, we won't take it. Life is about to give you ups and downs. All the wins and the outs and the smiles and frowns. They will tell you, settle down, stay on the ground. But no, I won't take it. No, we won't take it. The same